Who created the Anunnaki? This is one of the questions I get asked the most here on the channel. And the answer is not as simple as it might seem. In fact, it's extremely complex. In this video, we're going on a journey, and I have no doubt that by the end of it, you'll be completely satisfied. That's because when we reach the final stop of this great exploration, we will have found what we are all searching for. We begin our journey not in the presence of a singular god, but with a symbol quietly carved into stone, stamped into clay, and carried through secret rites across centuries. The star. To modern eyes, it may seem like decoration, but to the ancients, it was a declaration. It said, quite literally, the divine comes from above. In ancient Sumer, the 8-pointed star was not art, it was theology. This star, rendered in the form of the cuneiform sign, Dingir, marked the names of the gods like a celestial fingerprint. Inanna, Enlil, Enki. That prefix wasn't ornamental. It proclaimed, this is a being from the sky, a deity, a Dingir. These weren't metaphorical skies. These were literal heavens, celestial realms the ancients believed their gods descended from. They didn't think of gods as concepts, they thought of them as real, powerful presences from above. The Akkadians inherited this symbolic language and refined it into something new, Elohim, a word, not a symbol. But its root still meant the same, divinity, heavenly origin, elevated being. From this term, we eventually arrive at El and Elohim, the words later absorbed into Hebrew scripture. But let's be clear, Elohim is plural, not a single god, but a collective, powers, forces, entities. And yet, over time, through translation and religious consolidation, Elohim was treated as singular, God, one, omnipotent. But that's not where the word began. That's not how it was understood by those who first spoke it. And above them all stood On to the Sumerians, Anu to the Akkadians, the personification of the sky itself, the celestial order, the throne above all others. He wasn't worshipped like a local deity. He was revered like the sky, unreachable, unchangeable, and always present. His realm was the seventh heaven, a term that echoes even today. His symbol, the very star we've seen etched on clay and echoed in history as the Maltese cross, passed down through royal insignias and secret orders. These symbols weren't chosen randomly, they were inherited, and they all point back to Anu, to the sky. This cosmic court of Anu, Enlil, Enki, and their celestial siblings is not unique. Compare them to other heavenly fathers who preside above creation. Zeus wielded lightning, commanding thunder beneath Mount Olympus. Dyaus Pita, the Vedic sky father, spoke authority over early Aryan divinities. El, the ancient Canaanite patriarch, was father of the divine council. All of them embody the archetype, ruler from above, sky-born, commanding cosmic justice. But look closely, these divine figures, like the Anunnaki, are never portrayed as the ultimate origin. They emerge within genealogies, hierarchies, and myths of succession. Their power is real, but derivative. Their authority is entrusted, not absolute. That hierarchical structure, divine royalty, family bonds, delegated rule, is precisely how ancient humans visualized divinity. The gods mirrored their own reality: cities, kings, temples, succession, politics. Divinity meant administration of worldly and cosmic order, not metaphysical origin. We must see that monotheism is not the default human vision. Ancient worlds began with plural deities, structured in dynastic categories, each with domain and city. Only later, through consolidation, theology, and empire, were these multiplied divinities collapsed into one. Even El and Yahweh themselves were historically plural figures before becoming singular and transcendent. The Anunnaki represent the foundation of this worldview, divine plurality arranged beneath sky god rule. Anu, as king of heaven, unified power but still participated in lineage. He did not create, he inherited. That realization forces a crucial question. If Anu is not the source of creation, who or what is? To understand the divine, the ancients didn't rely on doctrine. They relied on symbols, prefixes, and poetry. Their gods weren't defined by omniscience or moral perfection. They were defined by lineage, domain, and cosmic responsibility. And their titles reflected that. The Dingir prefix didn't just apply to one god. It was used for all, a democratization of the heavens, a reminder that divinity was a shared phenomenon, not a singular authority. But something happened, something profound. As centuries passed, the old gods of storm and sea, love and war began to fade. And in their place, a new idea emerged. One God, one truth, one book. This was not an evolution of theology. It was a consolidation of power. The plural became singular. The council became a throne. Elohim, once a term denoting a group, was transformed into God. Monotheism replaced polytheism, not through revelation, but through political and cultural engineering. It was easier to command loyalty to one sovereign, one heaven, one judgment. The ancients didn't separate reality into categories like we do. Good and evil, God and devil, angel and demon, heaven and hell. Their world was messier. The divine was dangerous, seductive, unpredictable. Deities fought, fell in love, punished entire cities, showed mercy without reason. Some were creators, some destroyers, many were both. Morality was not a binary, it was circumstantial, contextual. Divine beings were reflections of nature itself, beautiful and brutal, nurturing and destructive. And yet, modern belief systems force these ancient stories into simplified moral frameworks. We want our angels in white robes and our demons with horns, but the ancients saw no such divide. Enlil, the great sky god, could be both a bringer of life and a harbinger of floods. Inanna, the goddess of love, could seduce and annihilate. To them, gods mirrored humans, and perhaps something even more primal. This complexity was embedded in their theology. Polytheism wasn't disorder, it was diversity. Every city had its patron deity. Every aspect of life had a god. Rain, birth, war, death. They were all under divine governance. But even within this, a city might elevate one god above the rest. This practice, henotheism, didn't deny other gods. It simply gave temporary supremacy to one. From henotheism arose monolatry, the worship of one god without denying the existence of others. This is, perhaps, how the early Israelites approached Yahweh, not as the only God, but as their God, a tribal protector, a warrior deity elevated to supreme status. Over time, this evolved into full monotheism, and eventually into the dominant religious frameworks we know today. But herein lies the danger. When we read ancient texts through modern eyes, we misinterpret them. We distort their meaning. We erase their nuance. A tablet that praises Elohim gets translated as a tribute to a singular, omnipotent God. But that wasn't the original intent. The word always implied multiplicity, always implied complexity. Even the Bible reflects this confusion. In Genesis, when God says, "Let us make man in our image," the plural grammar is there for all to see. Who is us? Who is God speaking to? The divine council? The other Elohim? The surviving fragments of a pantheon erased from history? Or is it the echo of a cosmic truth we've long since buried? This is the crux of our search. When we reduce the divine to a single name, we lose the conversation between heavens. We flatten the narrative. And worse, we make ourselves forget. Forget that the gods once walked among us. That divinity once had a lineage, a history, a genealogy that stretched back to the stars. Forget that the Dingir prefix wasn't just about reverence, it was about origin. These beings didn't rise from human imagination. They descended. The God of religions is not the true one. For centuries, religions have done more than sanctify. They've anchored control over humanity, steering souls through fear, obedience, and the promise of salvation. But why has religion so often become a tool of power, rather than a pathway to liberation? Because authority always needs its author. And what claim to authority could be more commanding than the divine? In the ancient world, religion and political power were two sides of the same sacred coin. Rulers didn't merely describe themselves as chosen by the gods, they lived it. Consider Hammurabi, the Babylonian king whose revered code began with a divine claim. Anu and Enlil named me to bring justice to the land. By invoking the gods, especially Marduk, Hammurabi wasn't just justifying his rule, he was binding justice itself to divine will, giving his edicts unassailable cosmic authority. This alliance of throne and temple began long before Babylon. As agricultural societies grew, the need for social cohesion and hierarchy emerged, and religion served as its scaffolding. Priests spoke for gods. Kings ruled as their earthly deputies. The divine right of kings wasn't a later invention, it was ancient human design. Through law codes, temple hymns, and priestly decrees, religion shaped the social order. It defined morality, sanctioned authority, and quelled dissent. When people believed disobedience meant divine disfavor, loyalty became sacred duty. And over centuries, this pattern did not fade. It spread, evolved, and consolidated. Control needs legitimacy, and vague, unseeable power needs a voice. Who better than priests, prophets, and clergy, sanctified mediators, to stand as authority? Clerics could claim access to the divine, so obedience to them became obedience to God. But in time, the pyramid sharpened. The divine became abstract and more potent. It became monolithic. If authority demands belief, then nothing is more powerful than belief in a single omnipotent God. Yahweh, the God who rose to dominate monotheistic faiths, did not begin as the transcendent, omnipotent deity later ascribed to him. His roots lie buried deep within the complex and diverse religious landscape of the ancient Near East, particularly among the Canaanites, where a wide pantheon of deities governed the cosmos. Among them were El, the high god and father of the divine council; Asherah, his consort; Baal, the storm and fertility god; and Mot, the god of death. Yahweh appears not as a solitary figure, but as one among many. Initially just another regional deity, in a spiritual milieu teeming with divine personalities. Scholarly consensus, as drawn from archaeological discoveries, textual analysis, and critical comparative studies, places Yahweh as a god of nomadic origins. He was likely a warrior or storm deity associated with the wilderness and the southern territories, including the Negev, Edom, and Midian. This is reflected in biblical texts that suggest Yahweh came from Seir, Paran, or Teman, geographic markers that point toward Edomite and Midianite territories. Yahweh was not known to the patriarchs or early Israelites, but was introduced later, probably through interaction with Midianite tribes. He was a god of storms and battle before he became a god of law and covenant. The transformation of Yahweh from a tribal warrior deity to a national god of Israel was gradual and heavily influenced by socio-political factors. As the tribes of Israel coalesced into a unified people, particularly under the monarchy of Saul, David, and Solomon, a unifying symbol was needed, a singular divine figure who could serve as both patron and sovereign. Yahweh filled that role, not through divine supremacy in theology, but through political necessity. The Bible itself, when read critically, reflects this process. In earlier texts, such as the Song of Deborah, Yahweh is one among many gods. It is only in later prophetic writings and Deuteronomistic texts that he begins to assert exclusive divinity. The assimilation of other gods' attributes into Yahweh is one of the most telling indicators of this transformation. He absorbed traits from El, becoming a fatherly, creator figure. He took on aspects of Baal, becoming a god who rides the clouds and controls the storms. Even Asherah, the consort of El, was at one time considered to be Yahweh's consort, as suggested by inscriptions like those found at Kuntalet Ajrud, which mention Yahweh and his Asherah. This suggests a period where Yahweh was not only one among many, but was embedded within a divine family structure. This gradual syncretism was not just religious, but political. The consolidation of power in Judah, especially after the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE, required a singular central authority. Religion provided the most effective tool for that consolidation. The priesthood in Jerusalem began to centralize worship around Yahweh alone, erasing other deities from the official record. This process culminated in the reform of King Josiah in the late 7th century BCE, who aggressively promoted exclusive Yahweh worship, destroyed competing shrines, and revised religious texts to align with monotheistic ideals. The compilation of the Hebrew Bible was deeply involved in this theological reshaping. The Bible is not a singular work, but a tapestry of sources. The Jahuist, Elohist, Deuteronomist, and priestly sources, each with its own agenda, theology, and historical context. These sources, compiled over centuries, reflect the struggles between competing theological visions. For example, the Elohist source uses Elohim for God and reflects northern traditions, while the Deuteronomist is centered in Judah and promotes exclusive Yahwism. These texts were not written in a vacuum. They were ideological tools used to establish and legitimize authority. The image of Yahweh as the one true God did not emerge from divine revelation, but from a process of religious engineering. After the Babylonian exile, the returning Judeans needed a unifying identity. The concept of a singular, transcendent, omniscient Yahweh provided that identity, replacing the fragmented pantheon with a single voice of authority. This version of Yahweh was not the desert storm god of old, but a cosmic sovereign detached from earthly limitations, yet deeply invested in the destiny of a chosen people. When we turn our gaze from Yahweh to Jesus, the tone shifts dramatically. In the earliest records, Jesus doesn't address God with the distant, sacred name Yahweh. Instead, he whispers Abba, a word dripping with familiarity and intimacy. It's not Lord or God, but Papa, reaching across the veil between sacred and personal. As one scholar observes, Jesus utters Abba, Father, everything is possible for you, not in formal prayer, but in the moment of mortal crisis and complete surrender. This glimpse of intimacy hints at a deeper spiritual reality, one that Gnostic texts explore more openly. In their writings, Jesus is not merely a teacher, he is a guide through the illusions of creation. The Gnostics believed that the real Father, the Supreme Being, remained hidden behind the facade of the material world and its creator. Jesus, in their view, descended from that true source of light to awaken humanity to its divine inheritance. And then arises the figure most central to Gnostic cosmology: the Demiurge, the false creator. In stark contrast to the monotheist's supreme deity, the Demiurge is a craftsman, a sculptor of matter, but not the source of spirit or being. In Gnostic scriptures, he is named Yaldabaoth, Saklas, or Samael, each name dripping with contempt: fool, blind god, arrogant designer. The Demiurge claims sole authorship over creation, proclaiming, "I am God, and there is no other God beside me." But the Gnostics recognize this as hubris. He is deeply flawed, contained, limited, and disconnected from a higher reality. In that way, Yahweh became identified by Gnostics with the Demiurge, the ruler of the material realm, not as the benevolent creator, but as an ignorant, vanity-driven figure who traps souls within matter. Yet Gnostic schools were not monolithic. In Valentinian Gnosticism, the Demiurge isn't purely evil, just ignorant. He is a misguided artisan trying to recreate perfection without ever knowing it, resulting in flawed creation. Behind the Demiurge lies another tradition: Plato's Demiurge, a rational architect fashioning the cosmos in alignment with ideal forms. Unlike Gnostic lore, Plato's craftsman is wise and cosmic, drawing order out of chaos. Aristotelian philosophy takes this further, proposing an unmoved mover, a timeless, perfect source of being that initiates motion without being moved itself. Neither of these constructs is the flawed God of Gnosticism, but they share the idea of creation as derivative, created by a powerful being, but not from ultimate essence. If we look at the ancient world, we will see that creation is preceded by another creation, which in turn is also preceded by yet another creation. This cosmic ocean, silent, infinite, was the canvas upon which ancient cultures painted their origin myths. Each civilization stared into that restless abyss and wove stories not of beginnings, but of a deeper, invisible source hidden behind the veil. These are the cosmogonies of humanity, maps leading beyond creation to the mystery that birthed even the gods. Consider the world of Sumer, then Babylon. The earth was an expanse of mingling waters. Tiamat, the salt sea, and Apsu, fresh subterranean waters, who bore the first generation of gods. This divine progeny grew so cacophonous that Apsu plotted to destroy them. But before he could act, Enki struck first. Furious, Tiamat birthed monstrous chaos. Enter Marduk, the storm god, a champion raised by the younger deities to confront cosmic disorder. Marduk vanquished Tiamat, splitting her body to craft sky and land, separating waters and giving form to the universe. From her lifeblood, he fashioned life, and from Quingu's blood, humanity itself. This is Enuma Elish, the Babylonian vision of creation as violence and rebirth. Order emerging from chaos. shift to the lush banks of the Nile. The Egyptians imagined creation not from conflict but emergence. At its heart lies Nun, a formless, infinite ocean beyond time, personified as both void and fertile potential. From Nun, a pyramid-shaped mound, the Benben arose. On that primal mound, Adam emerged, self-created, sovereign above all. Through self-generation, by gesture, breath, or even intimate union with his own shadow, he brought forth Shu, air, and Tefnut, moisture. From them sprang earth and sky, and upon that foundation the great gods followed: Geb, Nut, Osiris, Isis, Set, Nephthys. This is the Heliopolitan cosmogony, one of many in Egyptian theology. Creation unfolded through family and cycle, not conflict, but cyclical harmony. Now turn east, to the vastness of Hindu thought. Here, creation is not a static event, but a rhythm, a pulse of the universe itself. Brahman, the unnamable, formless absolute, emanates all that is, sustaining cosmic cycles through Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. Creation is circular. Birth, death, and rebirth loop through infinite ages. Time stretches wide, cyclical, untethered, beyond human imagining. Even while creation is described, the real story is in the unseen flow of Brahman through all. The Greeks, too, probe the void. In Hesiod's Theogony, all begins with chaos, a yawning void or gap. From it sprung Gaia, Tartarus, and Eros. Gaia birthed Uranus, whose union with her produced titans, cyclopes, and giants. The divine order formed through generations of conflict, alliances, and cosmic hierarchy. Like Enuma Elish and his heirs, the Greek cosmogony saw the world born through lineage and conflict, but always within a genealogy of power, not through transcendence. Now step into a later, redrawn tradition, the Hebrew cosmogony of Genesis. It speaks of chaos. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Over 6 days, a singular God speaks creation into being. Light, sky, land, life. No battle, no divine genealogy, no plurality of beings. But the echoes of older stories linger. Order out of chaos, light from darkness, are poetic echoes of myths like Enuma Elish. Yet here, the Creator stands alone, sovereign, unchallenged. A later synthesis of older motifs reshaped into monotheism. Behind these origin sagas is a deeper truth. These myths aren't reports. They are metaphors, symbols shaped by human longing to understand. Why does creation flow from water? Because the ancients knew when waters receded, life emerged. The fertile flood plains of the Nile and Tigris shaped their view of origin. Each cosmogony reflects its people's worldview: the brutal realism of Babylon, the cyclical harmony of Egypt, the infinite embrace of Hinduism, the mythic lineage of Greek titans, and the ordered morality of Hebrew scripture. Beneath them all, though, lies a common structure: chaos, divine action, cosmos, and behind that structure lies a question they all point toward: the source that preceded creation itself. Bible scholars view Genesis not as fresh revelation, but as part of this continuum. It borrows, transforms, rejects, synthesizes. Abrahamic creation is neither radical nor new. It's a conscious reshaping of shared cosmic symbols into a new, single-voice theology. This mirrors the Gnostic demiurge, a powerful entity shaping material existence, yet not its ultimate source. When we confront all this, a startling pattern emerges. The God of religions may be mighty, but he's not the origin of origins. Yahweh's elevation to monotheistic status may mirror the demiurge's claim, crafted, consolidated, authoritative, but not absolute. The Hebrew God, the Creator, reflects not omnipotence, but lineage and ideas rooted in antiquity. All creation stories point beyond creation to something prior, unfathomable, ineffable. Behind him lies the true divine spark, the ineffable, nameless, boundless presence beyond creation, creator, or cosmic craftsman. Our path must proceed beyond the figure of the demiurge. If we return to the Enuma Elish, we realize that what we've called creation is merely the action of beings birthed from cosmic ancestry. Anu springs not from nothingness, but from Anshar and Kishar, themselves born of Tiamat and Apsu. Each stage of this mythology is creation by descent, not a sovereign act of originating power. The Anunnaki are heirs of a lineage, administrators of celestial order, not architects of existence. They emerge from the sky and earth, descend to the world, and are then woven into our memory and worship. They are visitors, not creators, and I have to remind you, Enuma Elish was written thousands of years before the Bible. That ancient clay tells stories far older than Moses, older than Genesis, and yet somehow echoing with similar patterns. That alone should give us pause. It means we are not hearing new revelations in the later scriptures, but recycled motifs, refined, politicized, and rebranded for emerging empires. Yet across so many ages and cultures, spiritual traditions murmur of a deeper reality, one beyond lineage, beyond sky gods, beyond any creator deity. In Hinduism, this reality is known as Brahman, the ultimate, unbounded consciousness from which everything arises. Described in ancient texts as Sat-Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. It is the silent womb of time and space itself. Brahman is not an entity among others. It is the essence of all that exists, entirely ineffable, known only through direct realization. Every leaf, every breath, every insight bears its reflection. Within Hermetic tradition, this same presence exists as the All, a divine sustaining force that walks in your feet, thinks with your mind, breathes through you. Divinity is not a remote throne, it is woven through every moment and every being. In the 17th century, Baruch Spinoza delivered this truth for our modern age. He rejected the idea of a detached, interventionist deity and proclaimed instead that God is substance. Reality is not created or commanded, it must flow from divine essence. Every heartbeat, every turning star, every thought is a reflection of God's infinite nature. Worship in that vision ceases to be kneeling before an image and becomes recognition of one's own being within the divine pulse. Across traditions, Gnostic, Hermetic, Hindu, Spinozan, we see a shared realization. Creation is not an act, but an eternal emanation. From the One, all beings unfold. From the Source, cosmos arises. And in that truth, the impulse to worship a singular idol fades, drowned by the palpable awareness that we are already imbued with divine presence. Yet, history has shown how dangerous it can be when societies project their deepest fears and insecurities onto a god, imagined as jealous, demanding, tribal, and warlike. The collapse of this illusion, the belief in a God who demands obedience through fear, This belief has been the engine of countless religious wars, sectarian divisions, crusades, inquisitions. When God is seen as an exclusive proprietor of salvation, and when authority claims divine mandate, humanity often fractures, kills, suppresses, divides along faith and dogma. We see they were convenient tools for power to govern souls rather than paths to inner liberation. And this is the reason I do not believe in the so-called true God that each religion claims to have. This is the reason I know that yes, all religions came from one source, but not all of them are helping develop a full consciousness turned toward that source. I cannot bend my soul to a deity who demands fear, who punishes questioning, who divides the world into saved and damned, who is written as jealous, vengeful, and patriarchal. That God, to me, is a construct of empire, of fear, of control. It doesn't matter the religion. If it stirs division, if it says we are saved and they are not, look, from my point of view, that is not religion. But I do believe. I believe in the message of the enlightened ones who have walked among us, Buddha, Jesus, and the other prophets who came not to found dogmas, but to open hearts. I believe more in their messages than in the stories people tell about them. I believe more in the message they left than in the religions that were founded through them. Because, from my point of view, organized religions have great and positive value, but also a negative and problematic counterpart. This is the God above all gods, not in hierarchy, but in truth. Not a king on a throne, but the silence beneath all sound, the light behind all light. He does not demand monuments. He does not require names. He does not command worship because he is the world and we are part of him. All creation pulses with his being. In the silence behind mythologies, behind pantheons, behind temples, exists the ineffable source. Beyond Anu, beyond the Anunnaki, beyond every sky father and demiurge, lies the nameless, eternal reality, formless, omnipresent, silent. And now, standing at the threshold of that silence, the journey continues, not toward creation, not toward a next deity, but into the mystery that preceded all words and gods. At the edge of our journey, where words dissolve and myth meets mystery, we encounter the silent starting point, the primordial waters. Thales of Miletus, the first philosopher of our Western tradition, spoke a profound truth: all is water. Not in the literal sense, but as the stream of origin, the arche, the boundless essence from which earth, sky, soul, and time emerge. From this living ocean springs not just physical life, but cosmic potential, the silent field upon which story and form are etched. This is the divine womb, the invisible sea from which existence is born, and the ancients knew it. The Enuma Elish begins with Tiamat and Apsu, salt and fresh waters from whose vast bodies the gods themselves were born. In Egyptian myth, Nun is the infinite water, the divine nothingness from which Atum arises. These waters are more than poetic symbols. They are sacred depths, the eternal mother and father of form and formlessness. From these waters emerge archetypes, not gods in robes, but living cosmic truths. The primordial mother, nurturing and generative. The primordial father, ordering and initiating, both embedded within the source itself. Not separate, but distinct expressions within the one. They are the breath and the fire, the pulse and the pattern. They do not stand beside the source, they are the source in movement. And from them, something wondrous happens. The sun is born, not as a historical person, but as a principle of emergence. The Logos, the Word, the flame in motion. This is not a hierarchy, but a mystery. The Eternal One becoming three. The Mother births space, the Father shapes it, and the Son fills it with life. Creation isn't a one-time event. It is the eternal emanation of the divine reality expressing itself through Trinity. In Hermetic writings, and in certain Gnostic teachings, a cognate triad appears. Hermetic texts portray the Father as the mind, emanating through the Logos, the Son, into nature or matter as the receptive matrix. Peratic Gnostics name the triad Pater or Father, Huios or Son, and Huli or matter. In this vision, the Father emits the forms, the Son conveys them, and matter receives them as the living canvas. Creation is not a command, but a transmission of presence, a dance of cosmic love. The astral light, the radiant current behind matter, is the breath of the One becoming visible. This mystery lives in the quiet center of consciousness. It whispers not in temples or books, but in silence, in the space between breaths. It lives in you too. It is known in moments of clarity, in awe under the stars, in the hush after grief, in the laughter of a child. The One is not a figure to be feared, but the ground of all being, the mother and father and child inside your breath. The true God never spoke. He simply is. He did not create the world to be worshipped, but to be experienced. And when we search outward, we forget. We are part of Him. We descend now into that silence, not to escape, but to remember. Because in the stillness, the questions return, not as doubt, but as doorways. Who is the God you've been worshiping? Is He truly the source, or a shadow of power, shaped by fear and myth? Is He a creator or an impostor, a jealous ruler demanding obedience, or a demiurge masking as light? And most importantly, what if the true God never had a name? What if the true God didn't demand rituals or monuments, obedience or belief? What if the true God only asks this, that you remember you were never separate. Remember the primordial waters flow within your blood. Remember that beyond Anu, beyond Yahweh, beyond all thrones and heavens, there is only being, the nameless source, formless, timeless, intimate. And perhaps the end of all our seeking is not a revelation, but a return to what was never lost, a return to the one in three, the three within one, not a creed but a communion, not worship but awareness, not fear but freedom. And in the hush that follows the final word, we find what we always sought. The silence before the first sound, the stillness before the first motion, the God who is, was, and will always be. Without name, without face, without need, only love, only being, only now. This is the end of the journey, and it is only the beginning.